Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again here on the Education on Fire podcast. Great to be back with you, and really do appreciate you spending the time to come and be part of all this. Welcome to Education on Fire. Of course, my name is Mark Taylor. Thank you for those of you who've been here over the last few weeks. It's great to kind of get your messages and all your options as they're going through. So yeah, that's really, really good and a really, really great option. I seem to be getting some echo back through on my end. Let me just check and see how that is going through. So let me just see if I can just stop that from going through. I think, yeah, there we go. It was just me playing back to myself through my YouTube channel. Thought that was a little bit weird. So it's been great to get the messages that you've been sending through. I really do love the fact that you keep getting in touch. As anything, you can get in touch through educationonfire.com. There's a contact page there. It's always great to hear your thoughts. And also, if you're here, please do let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what organisation, what school, who it is that you're sort of supporting, what type of children you're supporting, and I'm looking forward to being able to share everything that we're doing here this week, and of course specifically because we're here talking about empathy. So I'm going to be chatting to Ed very shortly. Of course, Empathy Week is coming up in February next year, and he's going to talk us through all of that kind of stuff. But you can see there, make sure you've got a note of the website and the details that you're gonna need to get involved if you're not already involved. So as always, these are the sorts of things that we're sharing here each week. A chance to share the podcast, the audio podcast, that is. If you've got any comments about that, if you've listened to that, please put those in the comments as well. Put the comments in as soon as you're ready. I can bring them up on screen as and when we're ready to kind of introduce those to the show. But yeah, no need to wait till the end. We can have that and some Q&A as we go through. I'm also going to share the podcast that Ed was on back. I think it was in the hundreds, I think the episode was back in 2020. So I'll share that with you towards the end as well. Always great to share if there's anything that you're doing that you'd like to be part of. If you've got a program that you're working on, if you've got a podcast, if you're involved in any shape or form in education, yeah, please, this is a place for us to share everything that's supporting children, supporting people that are supporting children as they go through. And of course, anything that's in the news we can touch on as well, but most importantly, we've got our guests that are coming in on a weekly basis now, which is I really appreciate people spending their time and sharing their message with us. So for those of you who aren't already following the audio podcast, if you go to educationonfire.com/listen, that takes you to this page, and this takes you straight through to whichever your favorite audio podcast platform is. Please do follow or subscribe depending on which the platform asks you to do, and that way you get the latest episode obviously going through onto your device. In terms of YouTube, please do subscribe. That way you're going to be up to date with everything that goes on, and also that notification bell is really important. I'm thinking we might do some unscheduled things leading up to Christmas as well, so you want to make sure that you have those already switched on so that you get all that for when we sort of pop up unannounced, as it were. So this week's podcast, which obviously is released on a Monday, was all about more than a score. And of course, if you're involved in primary education, it's a really important thing with so many tests, so many things that are going on for young children. More than a score are here to sort of share that message of kind of children are more than that, and actually sort of putting the heart and soul of what education should be back sort of front and foremost, that sort of child-centered idea of education, which of course for myself as part of the National Association for Primary Education is something we're very keen on as well. And as with always, if you go to the Education on Fire website, all the show notes have details of each of those episodes, but also you can literally click straight through to the websites that we're using and those things as well. So yeah, if you have listened, please do check that out. Let me know what you think about that. And of course, it's going to be obviously important as the year goes on and more of the heading towards the SATs and that kind of thing. We want to make sure that if there's any way we can support more than a score, and I know on their webpage they have things and templates to write to your MP and that kind of thing to really put pressure on if it's something that you feel very passionate about as well. So let's bring Ed onto the show. We're going to be talking about Empathy Week and giving him an opportunity to share all of his stuff, and most importantly, his travels, because I know that he's not in the UK at the moment. He's actually in Mexico. So let's bring Ed on. Ed, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back. And yeah, as you can tell, it's a very sunny, I think 26, 27 degrees in Mexico City today. So yeah, avoiding the British cold weather.
Excellent. The joys of being able to pick your travel times and the projects that you're doing. So why don't we just start with that? People who haven't come across Empathy Week before, tell us a little bit about, first of all, what you're doing at the moment, and then sort of a little bit of the history about it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in Mexico City. I'm here for five weeks or so, and I'm filming five incredible people. In fact, one of them today was an ex-Mexican Paralympian who helps people with disabilities and learning difficulties, trains them as a coach running. So I was there this morning with him, meeting him, and I'm going to be filming his life and his story. And ultimately, what we do at Empathy Week is that we use film as a powerful tool to develop the skill of empathy in students. We started in 2020. We launched very much as a project in February 2020, which everyone remembers as a great time to launch anything with the pandemic. So that happened, and what we found is that schools really love what we were doing. My background is I was a teacher in North London. I taught science for 3 years in a North London school, 1,600 kids. Had the experience of leading the chemistry department for a year or two as well. And you know, like any teacher that's worked in a school will understand the multitude of different people, beliefs, things that are going on. Like every day is different. It's nuanced beyond nuance. It's just everything. Things change instantly, but the thing that does get you through, and the thing that helps to build culture in school, that helps to build positive relationships, well-being, and academic success, is really at the core of it, an understanding of each other. And I didn't use it at the time that I was teaching, but this shared empathy, this empathy between students, empathy between staff, empathy between students and staff, and this understanding that actually everything that builds towards success in schools ultimately comes from a foundation of strong, healthy relationships. And that's academic success as well. So Empathy Week has its roots in very much my own personal experience of teaching, and then my journey when I left teaching into filmmaking. And I kind of found this sweet spot after experimenting through a number of years, and particularly in grassroots homelessness organizations. I was helping them to film and take photos and help them, came together into a nice project, which was this aha moment when I was in the middle of, actually I was back in Mexico City in 2018 at something called the Homeless World Cup. And it was there that I discovered the amazing team called Slum Soccer that represents the team of India at the Homeless World Cup. And they wanted me to help them develop a leadership course alongside their coaching program in India, and I have a master's in leadership and education. So I went and helped them do that. And that was the moment where I was like, I can put together some incredible films about some incredible people that educate young people, not in a charity advert way, not in a poverty porn way, not in a way to say, oh, look how bad these people have it compared to you. It's totally not what we're trying to do with Empathy Week. We're trying to build understanding and empathy. And that means coming from a neutral standpoint and understanding where someone else's life comes from, who they are, what they think, what they do. If that first series of Empathy Week, which was very much a project, and I remember Pankaj, who was one of my best friends now. We call each other brothers. I lived on the back of his motorbike in India and trusted my life with him. Anyone that's been to India and been on a road will know what I mean. And his house was made of mud. But I said to him a number of times, would you give this up to live in the UK? No. Would you, rather have this? No. Like for him, it's just a way of life. It's just him, and that's ultimately what empathy is about. We all have our own worldview, and for us, we go, of course, I don't want to live there. But for him, it's the other way around. It's like, well, why would I want to live in rainy England when my family and here, and this is part of my culture? So it's really about how can we get young people to understand others, and then by doing that through film, that then translates into the classroom, into life, into society. And I don't think there's a better time to be talking about the need for empathy than now, with what's going on in the world, with the horrendous things we're seeing in not just one war, but multiple wars, multiple crises across the world. And actually, I think the difficulty that schools are having now from the teachers that I'm speaking to is they don't know what to say, and they don't know how to have these conversations. And actually, empathy is a tool to have constructive conversations that don't need a right answer, that don't need someone to be right, that don't need someone to be wrong, that just need to create space, allow people to be seen, heard, and understood. And if you can do that, that brings belonging, and that's empathy in action. And ultimately, this is a very long introduction, but this is what we're trying to do. This is what Empathy Week exists. It exists because actually there's research, and we've done our own pilot research as well since we last spoke with Cambridge Uni, that shows that you can develop the skill of empathy. By doing so, you can also increase the self-esteem of students and their well-being. You can also reduce stereotypes and bias. You can reduce cyberbullying. There's a study that's done with 1,000 plus kids in America that showed that you can reduce cyberbullying of a racist and gender stereotype nature. And really, actually, when you think about it, everything comes down to understanding. I always say to teachers, name a skill that you want to develop in your students, and I will show you how empathy sits at the base of that. Leadership, communication, creativity, kindness. I talk about kindness is often wasted without empathy. And an analogy I give for this is when I was working in homelessness, or just even being a person on the street. I see someone outside of a Tesco or a Sainsbury's. I walked in, I bought a meal deal, I came back out, gave it to them. That is a kind act. I've used my money and I've used a bit of my time to have a kind act and to give that to this man. And then he looks up at me and says, I don't eat meat. I bought him a chicken sandwich. I don't eat meat. And then beyond that, actually, he told me he was a vegan. And in my head, I'm creating all these stereotypes. How can you be, beggars can't be choosers, this and that. But actually, what that comes down to is a lack of empathy. There's not a lack of kindness, a lack of empathy. Had I said, hey, mate, just about to go into the shop, got a couple of quid, meal deal, what would you like, anything? Yes, please. Oh, can I just have a chocolate bar or just have a can of Coke or whatever? I would have then been able to carry out my kind act, and it would have impacted his life in a way that he felt seen, heard, and understood, rather than my kind act, in this case, being wasted. Not always. So I see empathy as a foundation for success academically, but also well-being. And we have such an issue, not just in our country, but in the world, around the well-being of young people and adults. Actually, there's a well-being epidemic, pandemic even, and it's not about getting your yoga mats out. That might help for some people. And it's not about a meditation app to give to all of your staff. It's actually about the foundation of our relationships. How good are they? Can we rely on people? Can we come to work and feel that we're seen, heard, and understood? And ultimately, what we're trying to do at Empathy Week now is just give the resources that would take a lot of time for teachers to develop and make, so that they have a plethora of different topics, conversations, and tools to start to develop this skill of empathy in their schools and use it year on year. So that's what we're doing.
I mean, that makes so much sense. And the first thing that struck me was, especially when you're talking about sort of young people, do you think they naturally are empathetic and they understand what it is inside them, even if they couldn't articulate it? Or do you think actually it's a skill that you sort of grow into, and actually is the sort of the talking about it supporting what they already know? Or, I don't know, do you get to the point a little bit like you see young children really enjoy learning and really enjoy playing, and then all of a sudden you get further into the school years and it's kind of a little bit like sort of the enjoyment's been sort of bashed out of them a little bit because of the way the system works and that kind of thing? Does it sort of work in that same kind of way, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're all born with our own kind of level of empathy, but the science shows that it can be developed and taught. And some of us will be more naturally empathetic than others, but that's also based often a lot on our experiences. It's the whole nurture versus nature argument. But ultimately, younger children, their circle of influence is very small. And it's why we age differentiate our resources and categorize what should be used for different ages, because a 5-year-old in school, their world really is their classroom teacher, is their friends in their class, and their family. It's not what's going on in the news. They'll be aware of it, but it's not thinking about countries. It's not thinking about even their whole town or even their whole school. And as you go older, you start to talk about empathy on different levels. Empathy as a culture of a school, then empathy beyond cities and as a country, and then empathy beyond borders, and then how do we build understanding around that? But it can definitely be nurtured and taught. And I always say, think of it as like a muscle. The more you practice it, the more you can control it. And it's not about becoming overly empathetic so that you feel what everyone else is feeling, and you're constantly worried about the state of the world. Empathy is very much about understanding, compassion, sympathy, and often sympathies, often compared against empathy. They shouldn't be. They're different things. Sympathy is very useful in a lot of situations. In fact, sympathy is what often leads people to donate to charity. It's what often maybe kickstarts you volunteering. You feel sympathy. It can be useful when you turn it into empathy, but sympathy can be also useful in a lot of situations. It shouldn't be pitched against it. Compassion as well, when you're helping someone that's in need. But again, empathy and compassion aren't the same things. Empathy is about understanding. Compassion is about action. And people say, oh, well, therefore compassion's much better. But it's not necessarily, because you don't always have to act immediately on everything that you feel and do. And it's also not practical. It's not pragmatic. Whereas actually, a lot of the time, we do need to sit back and we need to be curious and find ways to understand. And ultimately, if you want to be nurturing empathy, I always say, whether we're doing teacher training and inset day, or whether we're doing a training online, or whether it's through Empathy Week, we say that ultimately we are all of us are just an accumulation of the experiences we've previously had in our past. Up to this moment, we're all just an accumulation of experiences we have experienced, not what someone else has. And so we need to think about, what are those experiences? Have I just hung around with people that sound and look and act the same way as me my whole life? Or have I been curious about another religion, or curious about another culture? Have I tried different food? Have I asked people why they do that? Have I listened to people? And ultimately, so what we say to teachers and students is to become more empathic, to build that empathy muscle. You have to be curious and go out and increase the amount and the diversity of experiences that you have, that relate to other humans and relate to the planet even as well. You can have empathy for the world. I think that's something we need to be thinking more and more about, is the understanding that we're not the only people in the world, and there's animals and there's plants and there's natures and habitats and things that need to be understood. And it's not what necessarily we think is best. It's actually sometimes putting your ego aside, listening to other people, and really trying to understand them. And that's difficult, because we all have an ego, whether we like to admit it or not. And we all have our own view of the world. So it's about trying to sometimes break that a little bit. And even if you disagree with it, even if you don't agree with someone's point of view, listen to them. There's nothing more dangerous than only hearing one type of news source, because actually millions of other people are listening to another news source, and that's how you get polarization. I think that's what we're seeing with social media. That's what we're seeing with politics, particularly at the moment, particularly in the US. There's just really a lot of polarization, which ultimately stems down to two sides not wanting to listen to each other, or two sides not wanting to even hear each other out. And that's silly. Like, we don't go through life like that. We have arguments, we have disagreements. It's part of life. So the skill of empathy helps you to navigate that better, helps you to navigate and catch yourself when you're maybe pushing your point too much. You go, actually, hang on, let me listen. Let me hear what this person's got to say. I may still fundamentally disagree with them afterwards, but let me give them time to talk and understand. I think that's why it's such a vital skill, because a lot of schools are also now, including and using restorative behavior practices. Empathy is the foundational skill for that practice in schools. And if you cannot train young people to be empathetic and to understand, even if someone's done wrong to you, that practice won't survive, and it won't lead to really positive things. And again, comes back to positive relationships, which is ultimately what we want to build.
Yeah, and you can see why that underpins absolutely everything that you were talking about, and also, like you say, what people are trying to instill within learning. Whether it's the education system, or, like you say, children that are in our lives. So just let's have a watch of a video, which I think was from last year, the Nepal video, to give people an idea of the sorts of resources that you create, and then you can sort of take us through a little bit of history about that, and then also maybe sort of how you sort of put the resources together, and why they work so well.
We live a life very, very simply in Himalaya. when I work in the mountain, we're taught to respect the mountains and regard the mountain as a goddess. We believe that the mountains will protect us. This is the only thing that I know to do my entire life. And this is how I've been helping my family.
I could see nothing since the beginning, so I cannot visualize anything.
Nobody give you hand you the opportunity over. You have to like go and knock the door multiple times, and I was ready to do that.
I'm teaching for the kids. It's okay, I can dry my tears so easily. I'm used to crying. It's my default state. You don't need to.
The world itself had more empathy, then it would be a lot happier place.
तपाईहरुलाई नेपालमा स्वागत छ।
I feel lucky myself to be a blind. Really rare people would get this chance to feel, let's say, like same world but in a different way.
Us.
Yeah, so I mean that really is sort of powerful, and take us through a little bit of how that came about and sort of the story behind it, and yeah, how it's so integral to what you're doing.
Yeah. So yeah, our structure of Empathy Week has changed, or is changing this coming year, and that's key to note. But previously it's been 5 films and 5 amazing people like you saw there. That was last year's Empathy Week that focused on Nepal and these incredible people. And we're changing the structure slightly because we've realized that Empathy Week sounds like a week, and it is now going to be just a week. And we're moving our films program. We're constantly iterating, improving, listening to what teachers want. We have teachers like helping us now with their ideas around the resources for this coming year. So it's like we're trying to be much more collaborative and bring the school community in. But a 5 film program will be coming back for next academic year. We'll be taking sign-ups and registrations for that coming April, May. But that will be a paid-for resource moving forward, whereas Empathy Week is a completely free, for any school anywhere in the world, festival of events. But we still use some of our film material in that. So basically schools, there's a schools information pack which will be linked in the notes. Our website is www.empathy-week.com as well, which contains all the information you need to know and links to introduction webinars, etc. But ultimately this year schools have we've curated and are currently curating, because we're still four months away, but currently creating a host of amazing speakers from different backgrounds. And our theme this year is home. And each of these speakers will talk about something to do with their life, so personal storytelling that has a link to the theme of home. We're going to have some live in-person events as well, if you're based in the UK, a couple of those. We're going to have some online and live events. So we've got 2 teacher CPD training sessions, one that's going to be based around emotional health and building relationships and cultures, and that's by the Centre for Emotional Health. And then we're going to have another one that's delivered by an organisation called Speak, which is going to talk about self-harm and give really great training on that. And these are CPD sessions that if you were to have at your school would cost you money. So we're managing to get some amazing resources and things that schools are struggling with time and organising things and money, and rightly so. It's ridiculously hard to run a school at the moment, from what I'm hearing. And we're just trying to help teachers develop skills and the skill of empathy, but also through learning about other things that they need. Some of those speakers are going to be absolutely incredible. One person who I've already interviewed, for example, is Charlotte Bellis, who is a journalist who's worked for the likes of the BBC, Al Jazeera, Netflix, and she was in the middle of Kabul when Afghans took over in 2021. She's a white Western journalist. I think she says in the interview, you know, working for Al Jazeera definitely helped her, but risking her life in a situation where people's homes are being taken from them, and she is so far from home herself, and getting that insight into someone is in that situation is just incredible. And so students are going to be able to watch that and hear, how did she become a journalist? What was it like? And she talks about how she used empathy as a tool to talk to the Taliban. You know, actually, I have to interview these people who are internationally have bounties on their heads, you know, some of them. Just that incredible. And then we've got Anton, who's the CEO of the British School in Ukraine, who's going to talk about running a school during war, what that looks like, and students are going to be able to see like a video they've produced of their classrooms. We also have then Kieran Lewis, who's a freelance graphic designer who works from home and has set his business up from home. You know, empathy is about not just people that are suffering or bad things that happen in the world. It's not about that. Empathy is about the skill of understanding people, whoever they are. And so we've got a host of amazing speakers. We will differentiate things by age, so we'll put things in categories, so it makes it really easy if you're primary or if you're secondary to know what's accessible to you. But ultimately, all that people need to do to get involved is go to our website, register your school. You'll then get emailed updates. We hope that a lot of information, I mean, there's a lot of information out there already, but things like sign-ups to some maybe of the online CPD and events where we need to know specific numbers, those will start to open in mid-December. So it's a really exciting time. We're really hoping that schools can get involved because there's no barrier to entry. I know that there's always tons of weeks, tons of days, and lots of things going on, but ultimately it's flexible. Think of it as like a pick and mix of empathy. You might only like the flavor of one sweet, or only want to do one session or use one video. Fine, register with us, have a look, use what is relevant to you and your school community, but start to take part and develop the skill of empathy, because actually it is one of the most crucial skills that we can be developing in the age of AI, in the age of all of the everything that's going on in the world. This is the skill that's going to set apart successful people and healthy people in the future. So that's why we're so adamant about it. You know, there's lots of reports out there about human skills are going to be the next kind of like A levels, because why are we going to be reciting a piece of information that we can just, you know, in the future maybe even use glasses to just show it in front of our face? Why do we need to recite that? So we're really looking to develop this skill because it's the future of education as well as being the future of kind of a healthy, well-grounded and well person. So please join us.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions or any comments or whatever, please do put them in the comments there by the side of the screen there, because we can bring this up and I can ask Ed on your behalf as well. So yeah, please do that. That will be really good to sort of to get that interaction coming on as well, and indeed sort of where you're looking from and maybe a school that you're involved in. So the other thing sort of following from that, because that what you mentioned there about AI and the fact that it's the human element which is the most important thing, which I think it probably always has been. It just happens to be that now it's becoming sort of very sort of immediate, but I think immediate in the sense that we're kind of running out of time. You know, you have to be really aware of the fact that these skills are not just we'll gradually build them into what we're doing. We need them to be now, and it's what companies are really looking out for. It's what we know as a society, which we really sort of need to be looking out for as well. And so to be able to embed it in a way like I said, the way that you've managed to produce it, it's free. You can pick and mix. You can use it in a way that you can. I just love the fact you're able to sort of bring that to the masses, and with the technology that we have now, like you say, it's completely global, as well as like you say the few little in-person things you've got here in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just trying to, what we've seen we're going into our 5th year, what we've seen is that schools usually start with a light touch. And then it might be a really keen classroom teacher. And that's key as well to people that are listening. Often people think, oh, you've got to get your whole school involved. Sign up your class if you want it for your class in your pastoral time. Everything's kind of designed to be delivered or be delivered within PSHE or within pastoral time or assemblies. You know, your assembly for that week planned, sorted, you know, saving you time, but also delivering something that's really high quality. But ultimately, yeah, I think it's schools then start to interlace it and embed it, and we have schools across the world actually that now do off their own backs their own empathy lessons in the week, because they see the value of it and they see how then the culture of the school changes and they start to understand what empathy actually means. I think it's often misunderstood. We're trying to talk about the very common saying of walking in someone else's shoes. Now that's quite useful for primary students, like I said, the levels of understanding of their circle of influence and empathy. But for older students, what we're trying to say is actually no, for me, I always use myself as an example because it's useful. I am a white man born in the UK, straight, middle class family, if you want to say that. I'm very tall as well. And all of these things they shouldn't do, but they have a societal advantage based on what we've said. So when I go around the world and I start to interview people, some places I've been have been slums in India or in Nepal or villages, or people that have such different wealth and wealth, not just in terms of money, I mean wealth in terms of opportunities, in terms of how they're viewed in society. If I go into that and go, oh, I can put myself in your shoes, that's not useful. And it's not true. I can't. I actually have no real understanding of what it's like to be born in a slum. I can only, what we always say is actually, leave that person in their shoes. Don't put yourself in their shoes. Leave that person in your shoes, and you yourself be quiet. Let them take your hand and lead you through their story. Listen, be curious, and understand them. And then this is the crucial bit. What they say, you have to believe, even if it differs from your own experience. And I think empathy is a difficult thing to really master. I don't think anyone can master it. I think that's what makes me kind of intrigued by it in a way that actually it's a skill that is so complicated and nuanced, because actually every single person is nuanced and complicated, and empathy is about the connection between and understanding between people. But we have to try, because if we don't try, we end up in situations like we're seeing in Israel and Gaza. We end up in situations like we're seeing or have seen in Syria, in Ukraine, Russia. There's conflict going on in Sudan. There's conflict going on all over the world. Refugee crisis in South America and Venezuela. There's so many things going on that actually involve or need an injection of empathy as a starting point. Don't get me wrong, it's not the be all and end all, but it's the starting point for the right actions that we need to take place in this world. And I think that's why it's just so vital, it's so crucial.
And I think a key thing from what you said there is it's not about getting it right and wrong. It's about being empathetic. It's about understanding all of that. It's about giving yourself the opportunity to learn and grow and be part of a society, ask questions, be kind of inquisitive about life, like say listening, not trying to fix, all manner of different things. And that's quite hard, I think, in a system which is very test orientated, in a system where you want to keep your head down and sort of feel like you know all the answers, and so you can see why it's of such great benefit, but why it can also be sort of so difficult for people as well. Let's have another look at another video here, and then I'm just going to play it, and then you can sort of talk us through how that came about and sort of the aim behind it.
This is another world for students. They haven't seen it, especially in terms of what we've been through with COVID. They need to see what the world is like. They need to see what their futures could look like.
It's very interesting. They're not like who I thought they would be. I thought they'd just be like old men, just like talking about programming and stuff. Definitely programming with the lenses. Yeah, being able to like create my own. It's very like hands-on.
It's been amazing, actually. I want to go in this industry, whether it's in radio stations or just in social media marketing or planning events, just to hear their job and hear what they do, travel around the world. Yeah, I'm really happy I got to talk to them.
Staff employees love meeting the students. I think it's a breath of fresh air from their day-to-day role, and I think it makes them realise how much they can add value to the students, kind of thought process and next steps. And I think that really inspires the students and also inspires the employees.
that sense of giving back and that sense of community and looking out for the next generation, just to ensure that this representation doesn't stop, for me is something that I will always make time for that, and I feel really passionate about it. So
they get to see the world of work, what's available to them, so it motivates them and gets them to really aim high and keep pushing themselves.
And just being invited into a company and getting that level of understanding, I think is really important, because I would put my life on the fact that when these students go back to school, they're not going to forget this, and this is going to drive them and make them even more ambitious and motivated to do well and to be successful.
I want to thank Snapchat Inc. and Empathy Week for this opportunity.
Yeah, today was amazing. If you want, you can take my number, I can come back. Bye!
See what their futures could look.
Fantastic. So that probably isn't something people were expecting when we said we were going to play a video based on what we'd seen before. So yeah, take us into that story and how that became about.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do, and order, I'm always open and honest about our business model. People say, how do you make it for free? And one of the ways is through corporate partnerships. Some people would say, oh, how can you use Snapchat? Because there's bad things said about Snapchat in the press here, left and right, center. And I say, Snapchat's like any tool. You can write something bad into the internet or Google. And actually, it comes back to what I said earlier about if we don't show two sides of the coin, or we don't show, what can... just different experiences build empathy. And with Snapchat, what we've been doing, it's been a very small partnership, but what we've been doing is showing young people that actually there is a free tool that you can use to create your own lenses. But what we've been doing is also saying, right, tackle we'll teach you how to use it. And you saw, I think, in the video, them playing around with sunglasses and putting them on, playing in a fun way, but then saying, hey, you can, is there something you care about? Is there a cause you care about? You could create a lens about that, and you could put it out there in the world, and you can do good. And actually, it's not about the tool, it's about how it's used. And we need to educate people on how to use things, but we also need to open up the eyes of young people to what is out there in the world. I would actually say for every single one of those young people that went to Snapchat that day, to their HQ, they only ever thought of Snapchat as this yellow square that they talked to their mates on. They had not even really considered that there was a human there. And then when they had, as Brian said, I thought it was just going to be a bunch of old men, And then all of a sudden, they're faced with Aya, a woman who wears a headscarf, a woman that looks like some of them. I mean, that's one of them. It gives me goosebumps. Watching some of the students that wear a headscarf, looking at a woman that's wearing a headscarf, working in one of the biggest organizations in the world, and she's from West London. She sounds like them. She looks like them. Shares the same culture, and they were not expecting that. And I put money on it that they will remember that day for the rest of their lives. And that's because that's an experience that they wouldn't usually get, but it helps them to understand the world better. They were asking questions, networking. They had different activities throughout the day, and that is empathy in action. Now, that sounds weird to a lot of people, what you send kids to Snapchat, but what we want to do is do this with more companies, more organizations. Ultimately, we're in the business of creating opportunities. We're trying to create more opportunities for more people to feel seen, heard, and understood. And that ultimately leads to belonging, and the skill to build belonging is empathy. People don't necessarily expect us to do that sort of thing, but we're trying to do it more. It's very difficult to get any kind of partnership with any organization these days with the cost of living crisis and all sorts of things happening there. But it's crucial. How can we widen the horizons of young people, and how can we get them? And partly the reason we use film-based resources is because it's not the best way to build empathy. The best way to build empathy is to go physically to somewhere and meet physically with someone in space and real time. But obviously that's not possible on scale. And film is very, very effective and very, very good at building empathy. And we've researched it. There's other research out there. But in an ideal world, maybe that's a future, get an Empathy Week Airlines plane, get Richard Branson to brand one, chuck 400 kids on a plane, and we take them to another country and they can experience things. So really, to any teachers watching this back and listening, and those that are here now, think you're already doing this. You're already building experiences. You're already doing days and weeks and themes. But how can you get maybe a real person to speak to your students or come in, and how can they engage with them, because that over time will build this understanding, will build this empathy, and will build this understanding that not everyone is like them, which is a difficult thing when you're a child, especially when you're a really young student, that not everyone has the same home life as you. It just isn't something that occurs. So yeah, hopefully that kind of gives another insight into some of the other work that we're doing, but it all centers around that core belief that we need to be building that skill of empathy.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you can really start to understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And yes, you might have to say, like I said, frame it around a week. It has to fit in terms of the building blocks of the system that's still there. But I think it's people like yourself and organizations that are realizing it can be so different. You know, if it was just a question of, like, say, a different partnership, a little bit of extra money, an opportunity for someone to say, well, it was great doing it for this amount of time, let's broaden it out, let's see how we can do it in lots of different ways. There are so many of us wanting to be able to do that, and as soon as sort of the shackles come off just a little bit, so that you can start to realize this is possible, and it's doing is enhancing and sort of shaping the world we want to live in, rather than sort of feeling restricted, and then it becomes a sort of an ever increasing circle of positivity then, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And it leads into other things. You know, I'm very aware that we are one organization, but there are other great organizations out there. There's Empathy Lab that run a day in June, for example, all around empathy and reading and literature. They've got amazing authors, amazing things that they do. And we are massive fans of what they do. There's other organizations that are running, kindness classes and workshops, and there's so much to do. And I think it's not about, it can be overwhelming as a teacher. I remember getting 100 emails a day about different things, but I think just think about what's best for your students, and choosing what you think is good, and you can't go too far wrong with that. But I think I say to people, take advantage of stuff that is out there for free, because I think in education you can take for granted sometimes. I remember when Tez started allowing people to charge for resources, and people go, oh yeah, well, it used to all be free. Actually things do take time and effort to make. I pour my heart and soul, I really do, into everything I do here, and I just hope that it can make a difference, and it has been making a difference. We've got a reach of over 1 million students over the past 4 years, direct engagement with 175,000 students, and it's stories like in the first year, where we had a teacher say, I had a child, a young girl, 11, 12, from Pakistan, who entered in year 7 and was made fun of because of her accent, and she just arrived from Pakistan. And watching the films that were based in India, she stood up and said, that's what it looks like where I come from. And her class were silent. And instantly, you've got that moment of understanding, that moment where a child might catch themselves at, hang on, I made fun of that girl, but now I have a real insight into where actually she didn't come from Manchester, another UK city. She came from a completely different, it must have been so hard. All of that understanding follows from that eureka moment. And that's the power of what we can produce and do. And I just hope that, it reaches more schools, and more schools are able to build and develop this skill of empathy.
Yeah. Well, as we start to round up, if you are watching and you do have any questions or you have any comments, please do them. Put them in. It would be great to be able to share some of those just before we finish. I appreciate some people just want to be watching. That's absolutely fine too. But just so you do, you do have that sort of that option there. So just remind everyone again of the website to make sure that they're fully aware of where to go. And we'll obviously there are links to all of these things in the description as well.
Yeah, so if you want to take part and you want to find out more, or just register, which is free for any school, anywhere, you can go to www.empathy-week.com, and you'll find at the top of the menu, is pretty easy. It's about, register, information. And we also have some introduction webinars that are running across the next few weeks, and we'll be doing even in January, where 15 minutes, again, really short. We know you'll push for time, but you'll get a whole kind of understanding of what the week looks like, what's on offer, and an opportunity to ask questions and to me or my team directly.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing. Get involved now, sort of get the ball rolling. Don't wait for the week to start, and then sort of think about how you're going to sort of put that into what you're doing. Sort of have it as an underpin of where you're sort of heading going forward. And we do like to share previous episode of the podcast. And as I mentioned before, Ed had been on, I think you can see there, February 2020, so a little while ago now. But if you want a sort of a bit more of a backstory about how it was put together then, and more sort of details about Ed, do go back and listen to that. All of these things, as we mentioned, are on the Education on Fire podcast. So that's really good thing to do. So thank you very much indeed for your comment. Let me just add this up here. Do you plan for Empathy Week to become worldwide someday, as it seems to be very impactful to children and young adults?
This is Kwesi, who I know, who is actually an ex-student of mine and is also featured in one of the Empathy Weeks. So I appreciate him watching and asking the question. But yes, absolutely. You know, we already have schools that take part across the world. It's all sort of, you know, predominantly UK and British based and British curriculum based, but we have no restrictions on it. In fact, here in Mexico City, there's 2 schools that take part, and I'm visiting them as well, meeting their teachers, hearing their stories. And for example, in Nepal, we've engaged schools in over 40 countries so far, and those schools continue to kind of come back and take part. So it is something that I can see growing. I hope it grows. I hope one day we're talking again, Mark, maybe 2 years' time, 3 years' time, hopefully shorter, but talking about how this and other social emotional learning skills and human skills are part of the curriculum and are really embedded. And students are taking part in project-based learning, because I think that is ultimately what the world needs. When I think about my own organization, and if I'm trying to hire someone, I really, to be honest, don't care what they got academically. I want to interview them. I want to meet them. I want to hear what they're passionate about. Skills, information can be learned and can be found. What can't really be learned imminently is passion, and is the way that you can communicate with people, the way that you can get on with people. I want to employ someone that has that already, and that comes from practicing as a young child and practicing as a young adult. The skills, the information that can be taught. Obviously, I'm not here saying scrap education as it is. I still think maths, English, science, literally, I think those subjects are still important. I just think the way we deliver the information, the way that we test, and the way that we scrutinise schools in particular is outdated. And it's going to be a bit of a mission to sort it out, but it's going to be needed.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because it comes up on the podcast all the time. You know, we wish there was a silver bullet that might change the entire system overnight, and it doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon. But then what can you do? You can create an organization, you can create a movement, you can have a conversation with somebody, you can be empathetic, and you can have create an environment in the place that you're working or you're studying or your school, which is making a difference to every child, and the ripple effect of that, which is very hard to see at the time, I think is a really important one. And just to know that that's happening, and I think to be able to chat to you again, to see that journey from where it was from 2 or 3 years ago and how that's changed, and how you're able to sort of morph that and affect more people, and like say the sorts of numbers of children who've been affected directly is incredible. So yeah, I really do appreciate your time. And yes, a very big thank you from everyone here at Education on Fire, I mean specifically for all the work that you're doing. And I really appreciate everything that you're putting in. Enjoy the rest of your travels. When do you think you'll be back in the UK?
Back 12th of December. So I think it's going to be a shock to the old temperature that my body's built up. But yeah, I'm here for another month and a bit. So
fantastic. Yeah, lovely. Well, Ed, thank you so much indeed, and look forward to chatting to you again very soon. And yeah, keep up the great work.
Thank you, Mark.
So you will have also remembered, hopefully, if you saw the show with Alex Harris a couple of weeks ago from BBC Teach. I just wanted to remind you that there's some resources that were coming up that we spoke about, one of them being this live lessons, as you can see here, related to the Romans. So do make sure that you go and check out some of these things as well. And I can tell you that we have a direct link to this particular sort of live lesson in the description of this video. So yeah, please do just click down in there, and then you click straight through, and then you can sort of bookmark when it is, and make the most of it if it's something you think is going to be helpful. So I really appreciate Ed from sharing his time here. I really appreciate you for being here and watching. I really know it's a great thing when people decide to spend this amount of time with us, and usually because we're passionate about having this sort of child-focused, child-centered idea of education, and however we can help that, then that's really what we're here to do, to share these things. If you knew about Empathy Week already, then keep spreading that message. If you didn't, I really hope it's something you can get involved in again. So thanks for your time, and we'll be back in a fortnight's time. Next week I have a school concert that I have to be part of, so there will be a video here. I'll create the video with the same sort of details of the podcast that's gone live that week and that kind of thing, but it won't be a live broadcast in the same way. But I will be back in a fortnight's time with another guest. So yeah, thanks so much for being here, and I will see you again in a fortnight.